post 2 times a week. On Monday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I recommend using headphones if you would like to hear the gentle mic brushing. Now, before we get into tonight's case, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give it a like if you don't mind. Alright, so for tonight, we are traveling to Grand Junction, Colorado. Shout out to all my friends in Colorado. The year would be 2007, and this is the case of Paige Birgfeld. She was 34 years old at the time of this case. Alright, so let's talk a bit about Paige. She was born in April of 1973 and grew up in Denver. She had 2 very loving parents, and she had a brother. She was said to be a very optimistic type of girl. She wanted to become a midwife, and she always wanted to have children of her own. She had a high school boyfriend named Ron Beegler, and when Paige was accepted to the University of Florida, investments were not always good investments, so he was losing a lot of money. And it became necessary for Paige to start earning as well, even though she had 3 little kids. And if you've ever had kids, you know that taking care of 3 little ones is more than a full-time job, you know. But she needed to make some money, so she started picking up some businesses, like she started a dancing school, she started selling baby slings, and she started selling for the Pampered Chef, which is a multi-level marketing company. And she even became one of their top sellers. But things were really very, very bad in her marriage with Rob. And one day when she was out at work in 2004, he called her up. He was at home and he said, "When you get home, you're gonna find that the kids have been murdered." Something like that he said to her, okay? And she took him seriously because he was a bit of a violent guy. So she called the police and they rushed over there. Everything was okay, though nothing had actually happened. But can you imagine how she must have felt hearing that? And then a year later, he physically assaulted her while she was holding her baby, or one of her babies. And the police were called. He was arrested for 3rd-degree assault, I believe. But ultimately, the charges were dismissed. And they wound up getting divorced. And he picked up and he moved back to Philadelphia, which is where he had come from. But she did kind of fear him, you know? And she had mentioned that to her friends, that she was very fearful of her ex-husband, Rob. So, meanwhile, she's left with this $1 million house, and there's a $6,000 per month mortgage. And even with these 3 businesses that she was running, it was not bringing in enough. So she was struggling. But meanwhile, she started talking to her first husband again, Ron Beagler. And they had made some plans to meet up halfway between their homes. He lived, I believe, around Denver, and she was in Grand Junction, and there was a town called Eagle halfway in between. I think it was like 4 hours distance, so at the 2-hour point they met for a picnic. And then they parted ways around 7 p.m. Now she had left her children with their live-in nanny, who was also her friend. And she said she would be back that night. So she left the picnic with Ron, and she headed home. And Ron had said, call me when you get there. So she called him around 9, and she said, "I'm almost home now, but I have to stop and meet with a client, and then I'm going home after that." Okay. So he hadn't heard from her again. He called her the next day and no answer. Meanwhile, also the nanny babysitter hadn't heard from her. She didn't show up that night, it was a Thursday. I don't think I said the date. It was June 28th, 2007. Thursday. And so the next day, when she still had not arrived home and had not been reachable, it was reported to the police that she was missing. At this time, the children were 8, 7, and 3. And the children, at least the eldest, was very, very upset that the mother seems to have disappeared. You know, she had been promised that her mom was coming home that night. And she leaves this tearful voicemail on Paige's phone, crying and saying, "Mommy, where are you? You said you'd be home. You are so mean." And I heard it. It is heartbreaking. So anyway, it was reported to the police, and the first person that the police suspect, of course, is Ron, because he was the last one with her. So they go see him, and, you know, he tells exactly what I had told you before about the picnic. They met, they left, and they checked his cell phone records, and he was cleared. It was, you know, he did exactly what he said. So, that led nowhere. So then the next idea, which we're all thinking, well, how about her violent ex-husband, Rob Dixon? What about him? He had already come back from Philadelphia to help look for her, because don't forget, she was taking care of his 3 children. So he's back in town, and they go talk to him. Well, he was cleared as well, because he had been in Philadelphia at the time of her going missing. Alright, so now what? Who else could it be? Well, on July 1st, so that is like about 2-3 days later, her car turns up in an empty parking lot. It was on fire. And so after they put out the flames, they see there's nobody in there, okay? So she is not in the car. But what they do find is a picnic basket, some clothing. They find her date book, which it survived the fire. And they looked inside to find that the pages from June 26th through the 29th had been torn out. So that's kind of suspicious. Everything is there except the time when she kind of went missing, you know. Also, the driver's side seat had been pushed way back, much further back than it would need to be for her, because she was about 5'4", I think. It was so far back, it was like a very, very tall person, like well over 6 feet, had driven the car last. And they got, some police dogs to do some sniffing. The dogs smelled a dead body in the trunk. No, the body wasn't there, but they got the scent of it. And the dogs followed a trail trying to match the scent of the driver right across the street. Sort of, I'll put up a picture here. To a mechanic's shop. And that was about it. So they're still left scratching their heads regarding who could have done this. Now the parents had come to town as well by this point. Paige has her children. No way. Now, the babysitter told a story about a potential suspect. She didn't know who it was, but she said that Paige had rented some office space in town. And one night, when she was leaving, she went to get into her car, and a white pickup truck pulled up and tried to block her in to her spot. She was extremely scared. She did what she had to get out of that spot. She said she threw the car into reverse. She sped out of there as fast as she could. She didn't care what she might hit. She didn't hit anything though. She just needed to get out of there. She said it was the most scared she had ever been in her life. So, somebody in a white pickup truck, that's all they had as far as who it could be. Now, a few days after the car was found, a motorist who was about 15 miles away from that car on the highway got a flat tire. And when he pulled over to fix it, he found Paige's checkbook on the side of the road there. And there was several checks pulled out and scattered, as well as further down the road, they were able to find some other cards that might have been in her wallet, like a health insurance card and some business cards. And it almost seemed like maybe she was, tossing out a trail of breadcrumbs for someone to come find her. But one of the things that they found was a business card that was from her escort business. It turned out that she had a secret life. In addition to those businesses that she had, the Pampered Chef, the dancing school, and the baby slings, she owned her own escort service called Models Inc. And she was one of the escorts. She went by the name Carrie. Now, it also turns out that back in the early 90s, she had been working as a stripper in Denver, Colorado. Now, both of her ex-husbands knew about all of this. It wasn't a secret to them, but other people did not know. I mean, a few people knew a little bit, but mostly it was secret life. Now, this company, Models Inc., supposedly did massages, if you know what I mean. And according to her ex-husband, Ron, there was no actual sex. That's what he said, okay? I don't know if there was or there wasn't. According to her husband, Rob, this is the reason why they actually had that big fight where he wound up getting arrested back in 2005, because that was the year that she started this business and they were fighting about it because he was not for it. But it made her a lot of money, and she felt that she needed this money to support their lifestyle. She wanted to stay in that house. She wanted her kids to be able to live there. It was all about her kids, and that's why she did it. So now there were a whole bunch of other potential suspects. There were about 7 men that she had recently seen, clients. And according to Ron, the one who was with her at the picnic, she was receiving a ton of calls that night when they were, having their picnic. Non-stop calls from these clients. Now, one of the clients was a man named Lester Jones. He was 55 years old. He was 6'5". So remember, they were looking for somebody very tall, right? Because of the driver's seat having been pushed an RV mechanic, and he worked at the mechanic near the car that was on fire. Remember, the dogs sniffed their way from the car across the road to the mechanic shop, so he worked there. And he had called Paige on a track phone. He was one of the last people to call her the night she went missing. And remember, she said to Ron, she was on her way home, she just had to meet with a client, and then she was going home. Alright, so it sounds very suspicious, doesn't it? And to make matters worse, for him that is, according to the babysitter, here is the scoop on him. He actually knew Rob Dixon from years ago. Something to do with the volunteer firefighters. Maybe they were both in the firefighters together. Something like that, okay? So he knew him. And he had found Paige through her business. And when she first met with him, she didn't know who he was. But when she got there, she's like, oh, I know who that guy is. He knows Rob. So whatever she did with him that night, they didn't discuss knowing each other. But when he called her for a second date, she didn't want to go because she didn't want him to figure out who she was. So she asked her children's babysitter to show up instead of her, because apparently the babysitter did some escorting as well. So the babysitter goes to meet with Lester Jones, and he's like, where is Carrie? Because remember, that's the name she uses. And he also asked for sex from the babysitter, and she says, I'm not doing that, you're not going to get that from me. But she said she was very fearful of him because he was very big, and just, there was just something about him that was very scary. So anyway, she did whatever she did. She got out of there, end of the story. But she said that he was just talking very obsessively about Paige that night. Like upset that she hadn't come, and where was she, and why wasn't he going to get to ever see her again, that kind of thing. So the police searched his workspace, at the auto mechanic place, and they found some things. Like they found the track phone box. They found Viagra, a men's wig. They found a can of gasoline under his desk. They found some women's underwear, some condoms, some names and numbers of sex workers, and a food scale from the Pampered Chef. Now they asked the boss, the owner of the place, why would he have a can of gas under his desk? And they said he wouldn't. That wouldn't be something that he should have. So they call Lester down to the station for questioning. He says he knows nothing about this. Yes, he did meet with Paige for her services. He admits it. But that's it. He didn't do anything else, and he doesn't know anything else. And he does not own a track phone. Never did. Even though he had a track phone box. And they went to Walmart and found CCTV footage of him purchasing the track phone, but he didn't own a track phone, and this never happened, according to him. So they didn't have enough proof for anything, and they sent him home. Now I guess he was feeling pretty guilty, because shortly after that questioning by the police, he attempted to take his life by taking a lot of sleeping pills, and he left a note for his wife. It was his third wife that he was living with at this time. And here's what the note said. "My dearest love, I prayed all night and this morning. I've asked for his forgiveness. Tell the cops to get blank blank blank. I never did it, but I can't be railroaded." So, shortly after this, he was still groggy from the pills, and he gets a phone call from the police. And they were calling him to tell him that he could come and pick up his cars because they were done examining them. And he says to them, "You asked me where I should bury a body." And the police officer was like, "What's that now?" So he repeats it. And the police officer was like, "When did I ask you that?" And that's pretty much the extent of the conversation. So, I mean, he was very groggy. He was on something, you know, a very large amount of something. And he was just talking nonsense, but that is what he said to the police. So that doesn't sound too normal, but, you know, it is what it is. So there was never a body found, and the case kind of grew cold because they didn't have enough evidence to get anyone on it. Until 5 years later, in 2012, 30 miles from Grand Junction, a hiker found some remains, skeletal remains, in a dried up creek bed. It was a jaw, skull, teeth, and other scattered bones. The cheekbone was fractured, and there was duct tape around the skull. Dental records matched Paige's, and it appeared that she had probably been tied up and beaten to death, although they didn't have any, you know, soft tissue, so they couldn't be 100% sure of exactly what had happened. Finally, they arrested Lester Jones in 2014, and they charged him with first-degree murder and kidnapping. And he went to trial in 2016. The prosecutor tried to paint out a motive, saying that Lester was just very, very upset and couldn't get over the fact that he wasn't gonna get to be with Paige again, you know, and if he couldn't have her, nobody could, kind of thing. It turns out that Lester Jones has a history of violence against women. Surprise, surprise. According to one of his ex-wives, when they broke up, she got herself a new boyfriend, and Lester chased the two of them with a gun, shot at them, and one of the shots almost hit the new boyfriend. It grazed him, and he was okay. So she got a restraining order, but that was not very helpful because a few days later, he came and he kidnapped her at gunpoint. He hit her a few times. He threatened to kill her. And he said that he was going to put her body at the bottom of a lake. Luckily for her, she escaped. And he was arrested and he was in jail for 5 years, and that was around the late 90s. And then his current wife, who was his third wife, she spoke. And she said that she had been out of town when Paige disappeared. And she came home 2 days later. And that evening, Lester said to her, "I gotta go back to my job. I think I left the lights on." So he left, he came back shortly after, and that is the time when Paige's car showed up in flames. So the time when he was gone, potential suspects, all these other shady clients of hers. So there was a mistrial. But luckily, it was only about 10 weeks later they had a brand new trial. And brand new jurors to look at the same information with fresh eyes. And this trial found him guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping. And he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. And that is the case. So, what do you think? Well, I'll tell you a little bit of what I am thinking. First of all, my heart goes out to Paige, who lost her life at the hands of this madman, and to her children, who are not so little anymore. But what a horrible, horrible loss for them. And to everyone else who was in her life, she had a big family, she had lots of friends, and they all suffered through this. And the fact that it took so long made it even more difficult on everyone. So what do we think about her having a secret life, a double life? Well, regardless of her having a double life, that doesn't mean she deserved to be murdered. Nobody would say that she deserved that. But I have heard, and I'm sure you have too, that jobs like the one that she was doing are extremely dangerous, and your chance of being a victim of violence are very high in that field. So that's something important to note. But nonetheless, we're not going to blame the victim. No, it is absolutely not her fault. She did not ask to be harmed at all. I don't know if we should even talk about this topic, but I'm gonna go ahead anyway. So I am thinking, and you might be thinking the same thing, which is, why didn't she just sell that house? I know she needed to take care of her kids. She wanted them to have a good life. She wanted to stay in the area. But it was too expensive, $6,000 a month for a mortgage. And that's just the mortgage, there's other things as well. All kinds of other bills. So I was thinking that, I have to admit, although it really has nothing to do with the case, per se, but I just was, I guess, wishing to myself, oh, if only she would have just sold that house, bought something smaller, something that she could afford, But for the sake of her kids, she wanted to stay in this beautiful house, keep things the same for them. So she had to go out and do this extreme career, Although it wasn't new to her, I suppose, because she had done stripping in the 90s. So anyway, I'm not trying to judge her or anything. I'm just saying, I think it would be at least important for us to take away from this how dangerous this line of work is. But I don't want to say any more about that, because I don't want anyone to think that I am judging her for what she did to I mean, could he be that crazy? Maybe, you know, it is possible. But I'm wondering if there was something more to it, you know? If it could have been more like he was afraid he was gonna get exposed, he was gonna get into some trouble, maybe in his marriage for having seen her, you know, maybe something like that. So I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much to everyone who has joined me in this video.